Fellas, as of Monday, October 16th, and there's a lot that's led to this. Brock Bowers now injured, maybe for the season. Some people saying 4 to 6 weeks. He's having a tightrope surgery for a high ankle sprain, but that has altered Georgia's national title odds enough to where, depending on the book you go to, Georgia and Michigan are either tied or Michigan slightly ahead. I think the last odds I saw were at plus 270. I think before the season, you could get Michigan around plus 1,200 or whatever it is. But regardless, and there's not a whole lot of stock that can always be put into Vegas lines. That's always indicative of where the money's coming in instead of what's being projected. But through 8 weeks, this Michigan team has not screwed around at all. I mean, there's been a couple lapses here and there, a couple of obviously maybe the worst quarter they played in the Jim Harbaugh era on Saturday. They had a slip up early on against Rutgers. Bowling Green was not always pretty, actually pretty ugly by their standard. But the way that this team continues to hammer everyone week in and week out, and then you look at how things are kind of shaping up nationally, feels justified to put Michigan there the way they're handling their business right now.
Yeah, and I honestly don't care what the odds say. It really depends on, what, it's a 2-game season, frankly, right? Maryland loses to Illinois. Maybe that one's tricky for Michigan. I don't know, but doesn't mean a damn thing to me. I think if Michigan and Georgia were to line up on a neutral field, Georgia would probably be favored by 5 or 6 points still. That's just the way I see it. And probably justifiably so, in my opinion. I just think that because two things, you do look at the strength of schedule. Michigan's beaten every team how they should have beaten them. Yeah, it's been bigger in some instances than maybe we expected it to be. A couple of games haven't been as good. So until they play Penn State and Ohio State, we really still don't know a lot about this Michigan team. Same with Penn State and maybe not Ohio State, because Ohio State did go into Notre Dame and beat them. We saw what happened to USC there. So, but it's about matchups too there. So you can't really compare like that. But regardless, long-winded answer, guys. I don't give a crap about what odds makers say. And I never have when it comes to things like that. Basically, it's all about going out and taking care of business on a week in and week out basis. And let's see what happens in Happy Valley here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I don't care all that much either, but I did say a week ago on this show that I thought Michigan was the best team in the country, and I think it'd be a pick'em game between Michigan and Georgia at this point. I think I would take Michigan in that matchup, obviously, including Bowers coming back healthy. I think this is Michigan's best chance here to get it done. But, I mean, the playoff run starts, as I've been saying for a while now, in November. Jim Harbaugh now saying this basically is November, and he's right. I mean, every game you got to win basically all of them to leave no doubt, and you don't want to leave it up to a tiebreaker or having to back in to the playoff like Ohio State did last year, which, by the way, nothing wrong with that. It's just risky business when you're relying on other teams like that. So, yeah, it's kind of a 2-game, 3-game season. I think playing Maryland in November is a lot easier than playing Maryland like when Michigan did at the end of September a year ago, because that team, for whatever reason, kind of wears down throughout the year and doesn't play as well when the elements get a little bit tougher. They're not built like a Michigan. So I think, Michigan should be able to do well there, but it's going to come down to Penn State and Ohio State. It's going to be a lot of fun, but you look at it here, you start with Michigan State, you get the bye, and then you are right there in November. And that was kind of Jim Harbaugh's point. And then you roll from there and see what happens. But I think it's interesting when you look around the country. This looks like the year that Michigan can get it done. Not that they're going to. They have to still win all these games, but it feels like a heck of an opportunity at this point.
Yeah, and in response to your Maryland thing, I think they've played in November. They've played Ohio State to the wire. 2 out of the last 4 or 5 years, or something like that, when they've played at Maryland. If I'm not
mistaken. But Ohio State's not Michigan. When you look at how Maryland's built compared to a Michigan, how much more physical Michigan is, I think, than Ohio State teams under Ryan Day. That's just kind of the way I see it, where they're kind of aren't built for that maybe type of battle against a team that's this physical.
Yeah, and losing to Illinois, it doesn't really matter, right? They are who they are. Maryland, they're capable of putting a scare into you at times, and then they're capable of rolling over and losing to Illinois at home, which is inexcusable, frankly. That's just bad coaching, right? If you go and you play a tough game at Ohio State and hang with them for a half and look like you belong, and your coach is talking about how you're a contender and everything, and then you come home and you lose to Illinois. Maryland, the Terps, they terp. That's exactly what turtle's going to turtle, and that's exactly what happened.
Turtle's gonna turtle. Something I said over the weekend is when teams show you who they really are, believe them. Maryland was completely unserious in that game against Ohio State. Didn't do the things it needed to do to make that game. The game was more competitive than the final score would indicate, but certainly shot themselves in the foot. Then they come back and lay an egg against Illinois. Again, November's tough for Michigan, as tough as it gets, and that kind of speaks to the rest of the schedule. But when people talk about this gauntlet in the month of November that Michigan's going to face, no, it's a 2-game season. It's Penn State, it's Ohio State, and you have that Maryland game sandwiched in the middle. And that's not to say that it won't be tight. I mean, we saw the Illinois game last year was tight the week before Ohio State, but let's tap the brakes on throwing Maryland in that gauntlet, so to speak, and talk about, separation weeks. This is what we're, the part of the season we're in. We saw Oklahoma beat Texas last week. We saw USC show its ass to the world again defensively against Notre Dame. They're not to be taken seriously as a national title contender. Oregon and Washington, terrific game. I think there's a chance those two teams play again. And this week we'll have that big pecking order game with Penn State and Ohio State. And that's kind of the first domino that falls in determining what this November chase sort of looks like for Michigan. So I just thought that was interesting. Again, Vegas odds being what they are, don't put a whole lot of stock into it. But I guess if you're someone who, put money on Michigan at plus 1,200 before the season began, or plus 800, you're feeling pretty good about yourself right now. But at the forefront of that, sorry, did you another point to make?
No, the only thing I was gonna say is that I do agree with you guys that it's wide open. There's no question that it's wide open this year, and there's not that one team that's like, okay, these guys are head and shoulders above everybody else. And we're gonna find out more and more about these teams here in the next couple of weeks, like you said, Penn State, Ohio State. So these are the games that we wanted to watch now, right? We wanted to see Oregon and Washington. That one lived up to the hype. Now we want to see Penn State, Ohio State. I think it is better for Michigan if Ohio State holds serve there, right? On the off chance, if say there's a three-way tie, then you know what? Then you still have a chance to win the tiebreaker, as tough as that might be. So with the West probably being, your record against the West probably being the tiebreaker there. So are we rooting for Ohio State this week, guys? Or should I say, are we rooting against Penn State this week?
I just root for good stories. That that about me. So there's I got no dog in the fight. So
ever the professional. I mean, objectively speaking, it's probably better for Michigan that Ohio State handles its business at home. But again, I mean, rooting for it. I mean, I think you'll see what the scenario is like, because if you're a team that talks about it, wants to be about it, has been about it 2 years in a row, you're going to take care of your business in those games and get to Indy anyways, right? So for me, it's just kind of more clarity on what the path looks like. But really, when you look at how the two teams match up, I do think that Ohio State winning that game Saturday is probably slightly better for Michigan in terms of the Big Ten championship, being something that they have the most control over in that regard.